When we think of maritime tragedies, the Titanic is often the first name that comes to mind. But did you know that another ship had an even more devastating fate? Today, we will explore a lesser-known but equally impactful story. An event that surpassed the proportions of the Titanic in terms of human losses. This is not just a tale of shipwrecks, but a lesson on how human decisions can influence large-scale tragedies. Imagine a scenario where thousands of lives were lost, not only because of natural conditions but also due to avoidable human errors. To understand this story, we need to go back in time and dive into the details surrounding this almost forgotten disaster. What was the name of this ship? Where was it going? And why was its story overshadowed by the Titanic? These are some of the questions we will answer today. So, grab your notebook or simply relax as we tell this incredible story. You won't want to miss any detail. The ship we are about to explore was not just a luxurious transatlantic liner, but an essential means of transportation for thousands of people during a turbulent period in history. Carried dreams, hopes, and, unfortunately, also fear and pain. It was a symbol of technological advancement, but also of vulnerability. On board, there were passengers from all social classes, from immigrants seeking a new life to military personnel on strategic missions. But what exactly led this ship to become the stage for one of the greatest maritime tragedies in history? That's what we'll investigate together. This ship operated at a critical moment in world history. Its routes were directly linked to significant geopolitical events. While the Titanic represented luxury and glamour of the industrial era, this other ship had a much more practical and vital function for the global economy. It transported goods, troops, and civilians between continents, connecting countries during times of war and peace. During World War I, the oceans became silent battlefields. Commercial and military ships faced constant risks. In this scenario, our protagonists sailed under invisible but very real threats. Enemy submarines patrolled the waters, ready to attack any suspicious vessel. Despite these dangers, the demand for maritime transport remained high. Thousands of people depended on these ships to cross the oceans. Now, imagine being on a ship under these conditions. The constant fear of attacks, combined with the difficulties of long and precarious journeys. This specific ship was considered safe and reliable. Its robust construction and advanced technology gave passengers a sense of protection. However, even with all these resources, it was not immune to the dangers lurking in the seas at that time. Moreover, there were political issues involving its routes. Some nations demanded that it carry strategic cargo, further increasing the risks. The passengers on board were often oblivious to these tensions. For them, the ship was just a way to reach their destinations. But what happened on this specific voyage would forever change the way we view maritime safety. The ship we are exploring today is called the Lusitania, a British transatlantic liner launched in 1906 by the famous Cunard Line. Built in the shipyards of Clydebank, Scotland, the Lusitania was a masterpiece of naval engineering of its time, designed to be fast, elegant, and safe. With 240 meters in length and the capacity to carry up to 2,198 passengers and crew, it was considered one of the largest and most luxurious ships of its generation. Its main route connected Liverpool, England to New York, USA, a crossing that symbolized the bridge between the old and new worlds. On May 1, 1915, the Lusitania departed from New York bound for England, carrying more than 1,900 people on board, including men, women, and children of various nationalities. Among the passengers were notable figures such as American businessman Alfred Vanderbilt, heir to the Vanderbilt Railroad fortune, and Irish writer Margaret Mackworth. Additionally, the ship carried a mysterious cargo. Documents revealed years later showed that it was transporting ammunition destined for Allied forces during World War I. The choice to transport weapons was a controversial point, as it violated international rules regarding civilian vessels during wartime. Despite the risk, the British government insisted that the Lusitania continue its operations, arguing that the transport of supplies was essential for the war effort. Meanwhile, German submarines known as U-boats patrolled the waters of the North Atlantic, ready to attack any ship suspected of collaborating with the Allies. On May 7, 1915, the Lusitania was sailing near the southern coast of Ireland, an area known for its natural beauty but also for being a dangerous zone due to the presence of enemy submarines. At 2:10 p.m. local time, a torpedo fired by the German U-boat U-20, commanded by Captain Walter Schwieger, struck the right side of the ship, causing a devastating explosion. The impact was so strong that many passengers were thrown from their seats, while others desperately ran to the lifeboats. In just 18 minutes, the ocean giant sank into the icy waters of the Atlantic, dragging with it 1,198 lives, including 128 American citizens. This event shocked the world and sparked heated debates about the ethics of using civilian ships for military purposes. The sinking of the Lusitania occurred at a critical moment during World War I, when the United States still remained neutral in the conflict. The death of 128 Americans aboard the ship generated widespread outrage in the U.S., fueling anti-German sentiment and pressuring the government to reconsider its position of neutrality. Newspapers around the world published dramatic headlines about the incident. The New York Times, for example, called the attack an act of barbarism without precedent. President Woodrow Wilson initially tried to negotiate a diplomatic solution with Germany, but the incident planted the seeds for American entry into the war. Germany, on the other hand, justified the attack by claiming that the Lusitania was carrying weapons, making it a legitimate target under the laws of war. However, many experts argue that the sinking of the ship was deliberately planned to weaken the morale of the Allies and intimidate other nations from joining the conflict. Among the victims were entire families who never reached their destination. A tragic example is the case of the Allison family, consisting of father, mother, and 3 young children, all lost in the disaster. Survivors reported scenes of panic and despair as they tried to abandon the ship. Many died drowning or of hypothermia in the icy waters of the Atlantic. The rescue of survivors was led by local fishing boats and nearby merchant ships, such as the RMS Wanderer, which helped save about 764 people. The city of Queenstown, now Cove, in Ireland, became the center of rescue operations. Its streets and churches served as temporary shelters for the traumatized survivors. The old church cemetery in Queenstown received the bodies recovered from the sea. To this day, gravestones dedicated to the victims of the Lusitania can be found there. This episode also exposed serious flaws in maritime safety at the time. Many passengers did not receive adequate instructions on how to use the lifeboats. Furthermore, the insufficient number of boats and the lack of crew training contributed to the high number of deaths. In the following months, the sinking of the Lusitania became a symbol of the brutality of modern warfare, sparking debates about the limits of military technology. Among the thousands of lives aboard the Lusitania, each carried their own story, dreams, and challenges. Some of these narratives stand out for courage, others for cruel fate. One of the most emblematic cases is that of Alfred Vanderbilt, an American magnate who used his last moments to help women and children board the lifeboats. Unfortunately, he did not survive the sinking. Vanderbilt was known for his generosity and dedication to philanthropy. His death was widely mourned in the United States, where his family was one of the most influential. Another prominent figure was Charles Frohman, a renowned theater producer from New York. He chose to remain on the ship while others fought to escape, calmly saying, "Why fear death? It is the greatest adventure a man can face." However, not all stories ended in tragedy. Dorothy Connor, a young American, managed to escape alive after being rescued by an Irish fishing boat. Dorothy later reported that she was trapped in a submerged cabin until saved by another passenger. Her emotional testimony was widely publicized in the press of the time. Then there was Theodate Pope, a pioneering American architect, who nearly lost her life in the sinking. She was found unconscious in the icy waters and taken to Queenstown, where she slowly recovered. Theodate later wrote letters detailing her experiences, which are now considered valuable documents for understanding the human impact of the disaster. On the other hand, the Allison family became a symbol of the irreparable losses caused by the sinking. Of the 5 family members, only the maid, Alice Lines, survived. Alice saved herself by getting into a lifeboat, but she never got over the pain of losing her employers and the children she cared for. Fate was also merciless with Edith Rosenbaum, an American fashion journalist who initially resisted leaving the ship. She only entered a lifeboat when she realized there was no hope left. Edith brought with her a stuffed toy, which she called Lucky Teddy. Curiously, this small object became a talisman for her and other survivors. The stories of the survivors reveal a mix of luck, courage, and solidarity amid the chaos. Many reported how strangers came together to try to save lives. However, these narratives also expose the horrors of the sinking. Mothers separated from their children, entire families lost, and people condemned to die in the icy waters. The sinking of the Lusitania was much more than a human tragedy. It had global political repercussions that shaped the course of World War I. In the United States, public opinion was divided between those who defended neutrality and those who demanded retaliation against Germany for the attack. President Woodrow Wilson faced growing pressure to act. Although initially hesitant, he sent a series of diplomatic notes to Germany, demanding guarantees that similar attacks would not occur again. In response, Germany promised to limit the use of submarines against civilian ships but secretly continued violating this promise in military operations. Meanwhile, pro-war groups in the U.S. used the incident to mobilize public support. Posters and propaganda showed dramatic images of the sinking, with slogans like, "Remember the Lusitania." The media played a crucial role in this process. Popular newspapers like the Chicago Tribune published inflammatory articles, blaming Germany for mass murder. In the U.S. Congress, lawmakers began openly advocating for America's entry into the war, arguing that neutrality was no longer a viable option. Still, Wilson sought to avoid direct conflict until April 1917, when a series of events, including the Zimmermann telegram and new submarine attacks, finally led the U.S. to declare war on Germany. Historically, the sinking of the Lusitania is often cited as the emotional catalyst that paved the way for the American decision to enter the war. However, some historians argue that the economic and strategic impact of submarine attacks was also decisive, along with the symbolism of the Lusitania. For Germany, the sinking of the ship was a boomerang. Although it managed to temporarily interrupt the flow of supplies to the Allies, the political cost was high. The incident created a negative global image for the country, fueling propaganda narratives portraying Germans as cruel and inhumane. At the same time, the United Kingdom skillfully exploited the episode to gain international support, especially from the United States. The Lusitania thus became a symbol of both human vulnerability and the complexity of international relations during wartime. Even decades after the sinking, the Lusitania remains alive in collective memory, representing both a human tragedy and a historical milestone. The site where the ship sank, near the southern coast of Ireland, has become a point of interest for divers and historians. Today, it is a protected underwater memorial. In 1935, the wreckage of the Lusitania was explored for the first time by the famous inventor John Logie Baird, known for his contributions to the development of television. Baird used rudimentary equipment to capture images of the rusted hull, revealing impressive details about the condition of the ship at the time. Years later, modern expeditions led by experts like Greg Bemis brought new discoveries. Bemis, an American businessman, acquired the rights to the wreckage in the 1960s. These expeditions helped unravel ancient mysteries, such as the true nature of the mysterious second explosion reported by survivors before the sinking. Theories suggest that this explosion could have been caused by secret weapons stored in the ship's hold, although this has never been definitively proven. Additionally, artifacts recovered from the wreckage, such as fine china, jewelry, and personal documents, are now displayed in museums around the world. One of the most important places to learn about the Lusitania is the Cove Heritage Centre, in the Irish town of Cove, formerly Queenstown. The centre dedicates an entire exhibition to the sinking. There, visitors can see original photographs, relics, and even letters written by passengers during the fateful voyage. In popular culture, the Lusitania also left its mark. Books like Dead Wake, written by Eric Larson, revisit the event with rich and emotional details. Films and documentaries such as Lusitania, Tragedy of War, 2018, explore different perspectives on the incident, from political decisions to personal accounts of survivors. Musicians and artists have also paid tribute to the ship in their works. The Irish folk band, the Pogues, included references to the Lusitania in some of their songs. Interestingly, the sinking of the Lusitania still generates debates among researchers. Some defend that the attack was justified due to the military cargo, while others argue that it violated fundamental ethical principles. Regardless of differing opinions, the Lusitania continues to serve as a powerful reminder of how wars affect not only soldiers but also innocent civilians. The sinking of the Lusitania was a clear warning about the failures in maritime safety at the time, many of them the result of negligence or decisions made in the name of profit. After the disaster, international authorities began revising regulations on the construction and operation of ships, especially those used for civilian transport during wartime. One of the main changes was the requirement for an adequate number of lifeboats for all passengers and crew on board. In the case of the Lusitania, there were less than half the necessary amount. Additionally, regulations were implemented to ensure passengers received basic training on emergency procedures before departure. The use of radio signals for communication between ships and coastal stations was also expanded. This allowed faster responses in emergency situations. Another important measure was the creation of safe routes for commercial ships, avoiding areas known for enemy submarine activity. These changes saved countless lives in the decades that followed, but unfortunately did not prevent other maritime tragedies, such as the Titanic sinking a few years earlier. The Lusitania also highlighted the need for greater transparency about the contents of cargo transported on civilian ships. The practice of hiding armaments on commercial vessels was widely criticized. Over time, international treaties such as the Geneva Convention explicitly prohibited the use of civilian ships for military purposes without prior warning. Paradoxically, the sinking of the Lusitania helped establish legal precedents that shaped engagement rules in future conflicts. In modern times, shipping companies continue to apply the lessons learned from the Lusitania. Emergency drills, rigorous inspections, and advanced navigation systems are now mandatory standards. However, the legacy of the Lusitania goes beyond technology and regulation. It serves as a constant reminder of the importance of prioritizing human lives above economic or strategic interests. Maritime history experts often cite the Lusitania as an example of how human errors can amplify natural or provoked disasters. For many, the tragedy of the Lusitania represents a pivotal moment in global history, when humanity realized that technological progress must go hand in hand with responsibility and ethics. The sinking of the Lusitania was not just a maritime tragedy. It also raised profound questions about the nature of war and the price paid by those involved in it. For centuries, armed conflicts were justified as means to resolve political or territorial disputes. However, the Lusitania exposed the devastating consequences of these decisions for innocent civilians. When entire families are dragged to the bottom of the ocean in the name of strategic interests, it becomes difficult to ignore the inherent cruelty of modern warfare. This event brought to light debates about the ethics of using advanced technology, such as submarines, against non-military targets. To what extent does the end justify the means? For many, the sinking of the Lusitania symbolizes the moment when the world realized that wars were no longer confined to distant battlefields. Today, reflecting on the incident, we are compelled to question whether we have truly learned from our historical mistakes. Contemporary conflicts still put civilian lives at constant risk. Philosopher Hannah Arendt once said that evil is banal, referring to how seemingly trivial decisions can lead to monstrous consequences. The case of the Lusitania vividly illustrates this. The choice to transport weapons on a civilian ship, combined with Germany's decision to attack it, resulted in a catastrophe that could have been avoided with greater caution and empathy. On the other hand, the Lusitania also teaches us about human resilience. The stories of the survivors show that, even in the most desperate situations, there is room for courage and solidarity. People like Theodate Pope and Edith Rosenbaum demonstrated incredible strength in overcoming physical and emotional trauma, becoming inspiring examples for future generations. Furthermore, the cultural impact of the Lusitania continues to resonate in our society. It serves as a constant reminder that every life lost in a war has immeasurable value. In recent years, monuments dedicated to the victims of the Lusitania have been erected in various parts of the world, including New York and Liverpool, honoring those who never reached their destination. These memorials not only honor the dead, but also invite visitors to reflect on the importance of seeking peaceful solutions to global conflicts. In a world where geopolitical tensions still threaten international stability, the story of the Lusitania remains relevant as a warning against complacency and disregard for human lives.